Hey folks, if you're looking for an in-depth review, you're in the right place, especially if you're looking for a fistful of folklore, since today I'm going to be talking about Kenei Design Shueisha Games' Oni, Road to be the Mightiest Oni. Just, rolls off the tongue there. In any case, was this hack and slash a hit, or was this road a dead end? I'm your host Arlyeon, let's find out together. When strife took hold of the land and the Oni were stirred into action, the great warrior Momotaro joined the fray and put them to the sword. Mostly. Amongst the surviving Oni, Kuta felt especially humiliated by his powerlessness during those events, and thus resolved to journey to the cursed island of Kisajima. Upon those isolated shores, he would challenge the spirits of long-dead demons and his own inadequacy, all so that he might become a match for Momotaro, strongest under the sun. Save that the island isn't quite as empty as he would have thought, for upon its shores he finds himself joined not only by the friendly spirit Kazumaru, a fellow surviving Oni who doubles as shopkeeper, but also a young human girl who fearlessly attempts to befriend him. And frankly, as far as storylines go, this one manages to do a decent job of hugging the curve between cute and kind of depressing. Because things aren't quite as simple as you hopping into the shoes of a demon looking to become the final boss. As you progress through the game's various missions, you'll occasionally find yourself treated with a cinematic scene which showcases the friendship which gradually blossoms between Kuta and the girl, and the complicated truths at the heart of their respective origins and the place Onis inhabit in the world. Factor in the details you can unearth from scouring the island for the various memos scattered about, and you'll find yourself immersed in a very different take on the Momotaro myth. One which ultimately makes for a fairly satisfying narrative conclusion regardless of the ending you pick. Admittedly, you can sort of see the bad ending coming if you've been paying attention, but even if you take the bait, you're not actually locked out from seeing the other one, given the game helpfully saves right before the finale. But how does the gameplay fare? Well, first off, it's a bit more complicated than simply being a hack and slash, since Oni actually kicks off as a small-scale adventure where you're tasked with exploring the island. That said, explore might be a bit of a strong word, since not only is Kisajima Island small, you initially only have access to a third of it. In any case, the gameplay loop is simple enough. In order to progress the main quest, you need to find a series of shrines to unlock the Isle's trials, which then take the form of Oni's hack and slash flavored missions. To initiate them, you need to track down the Shadow Oni, which serve as their physical manifestation, with every 6 culminating in a boss fight, and every 12 unlocking another portion of the island, and a fresh set of shrines to hunt down. Admittedly, there is a little bit more to the adventure component than this. For instance, you can go mushroom picking, since that's the game's currency. There's a pig you can tame in the second area to compensate for your move speed, and there's collectibles, such as the memos I mentioned earlier, chests containing supplies, and even some small oddities tied to the game's side quests, which provide helpful bonuses like improving some of your abilities. That said, the crux of my exploration was spent spirit hunting. See, Kuta starts out incredibly fragile to the point that you'll be barred from tackling the first boss until you gain the requisite amount of health. That said, gaining health is a bit of a trial, since you essentially need to rove the island, pinging a radar command with the help of your little ghost buddy. I mean, it's not quite blindly, since his horn does ignite when you're close to his spirit, but if you're keen on unlocking everything and gaining as much health as you possibly can, which does have additional rewards, it's a bit of a trial, especially given that it's not simply a matter of finding the spirit. You have to then bring it to a save statue, while being hounded by a giant slobbering shadow demon. And no, you can't simply cheese it by riding the pig, you'll get kicked off. Nor can you even use the teleport move you acquire later on. You simply have to waddle across the island, occasionally flopping onto your face as a dodge when it gets too close. Rinse and repeat for 56 different spirits. It's a bit iterative all given, and while you can technically pick up more than one spirit at a time, that's only until you have a shadow demon pop up near you, so you will frequently be carrying them one at a time, with the occasional lucky 2. But what about the hack and slash elements? Well, mechanically speaking, it's simple enough, given Kuta's kit consists of a simple combo, which changes depending on the weapon he's wielding, a spin attack, and a dodge. Well, that and a special attack, which charges over time. Initially, this is a shockwave that also grants you brief invulnerability, but as you clear out certain bosses, you'll slowly gain access to the other options, such as making clones of yourself or a massive AoE. I mean, technically, he also has a limited range option in the form of Kazemaru, but the spirit's energy pool is limited and often better reserved for emergency heals. As for the missions themselves, well, each one tasks you with beating the living hell out of a fair number of Oni in an especially living sense, given just knocking them out isn't enough, you also need to pummel the soul that floats out of their downed bodies. And I specify need because they will revive if you don't finish the job, though this is facilitated by the ability to stylishly chain together soul murder for the sake of convenience. The actual button inputs for this is brain dead simple. In any case, there is overall a somewhat adequate array of opponents to square up against, but it won't be long until the actual experience starts to blur together, given how similar the missions will feel. Admittedly, it does try to add some interesting wrinkles, like some perspective shifts that make the game a side-scroller or a top-down experience, but it's more of a quirky little novelty at the end of the day, or whatever word you use to describe escort missions. Personally, I choose suffering, since those stages are very much a case of guarding an inept bozo from getting circle beaten if you stray too far, while still trying to get the mission objective done. Still, I do have to give Oni some credit here, because even when I found myself feeling a bit worn down from the busy work of clearing missions, the boss fights were always something to look forward to. Each one plays out fairly differently, serving as both a solid combat encounter and a bit of a puzzle insofar as to how to navigate the boss's mechanics and create openings. In fact, my absolutely favorite was the 6th boss, which I enjoyed to such a degree that it made me substantially more excited for the ensuing finale. It is a great encounter. And this has been a pretty good summary of the gameplay, so let's tackle the visuals. And honestly, I'm not sure what to say here, since I frankly found that Oni looked quite good. Really, the only thing I might nitpick is that there's a number of harder enemy variants that are just the mob but blanched, or the mob made black as night, and yeah, nah. And I'll admit, the cutscenes did feel a bit slow insofar as their execution, but I really enjoyed how they played out stylistically, and the way that the words and images lingered on the overworld after the effect, or the way the title screen does. It's just a really cute, charming detail. Oh, and playing with fashion is fun, as always. Because see, while you do have some mechanical benefits for buying gear, like changing the combo for your weapon or maybe adding an altogether negligible amount of health, the most powerful option is fashion, since Kuta does change his appearance depending on what you have equipped. As does the girl if you find additional kimonos spread across the island. And then we get to the music, and while I enjoy the soundtrack, and I find it to be a solid accompaniment to the mood that the game's trying to establish, it does feel rather limited, to the point that you get very familiar with its vocal tracks. But that's the long of things, so let's all boil it down, shall we? And at the end of the day, Oni exists in a rather odd spot. On a purely narrative level, I'm actually quite fond of the way it tackles the story of Momotaro, and found it to be an altogether touching tale. That said, getting to that narrative payoff was a process, and one which I managed despite the gameplay. In fact, I think it was the boss fights that served as some of the largest incentives for progressing forward, though I'll admit that the actual act of exploring the island and actually engaging with what it had to offer wasn't terrible. Beyond spirit hunting. Still, I found that the highlights managed to offset its low points enough that I can at least tentatively call this one a fumble, since I managed to get some fun out of it, despite the fact that the game kept insisting that I scour its hills for roving spirits. Though I should probably offer at least a bit of an additional warning here. While you can use keyboard and mouse or controller with this, I definitely prefer the controller, and you don't have any rebinding options. Really, the nicest thing that I can say that Oni does for you as far as accessibility goes is it auto-saves after any progress you make. Anywho, thanks for tuning in. If you agree, disagree, or just have something to say to me, feel free to comment. And if you enjoy my efforts to create new indie reviews, interviews, and gaming content, hit the subscribe button and the bell. For the Discord-savvy folks, there's a link to my community, the Crit Hit Cauldron, in the video description, and my Patreon, so you can support me and the other members of Crit Hit. I've also been trying to sneak in a few previews of some of the stuff I'm doing before it gets released, so that's, I guess, a little bit of a perk. Also, there's my Twitch. If you want to see me get dunked on in Indie Games Live, I will probably be getting back into that a bit more recently once I stop playing RPGs. That said, I'll catch you on the next episode of Crit Hit. Take care till then, folks.